So when I do a reading, I liken my body to kind of that of a canvas, and whatever comes through kind of paints the picture. And the kind of colors it can use are my senses. So sometimes I'll get a taste, a smell. Sometimes I'll hear things internally, almost like a song being stuck in my head. Other times it'll come through as a knowingness. So there's all these different kind of facets of which information can come through, and the key is being able to kind of discern and intuit how information is coming in, what it means, and how to kind of put it together and then deliver it. So it's definitely a skill set, but I wouldn't consider it like a gift, as people often say. It's something you definitely have to work at to, I think, keep sharp at.
Wow. Do you fear death, knowing what you know?
Yeah, I still look both ways when I cross the street. I still definitely have an awareness of how fragile life is and how often things can go wrong. I've had so many situations where I've sat in front of people who've passed on life after death. A man had an umbrella pole, just through a gust of wind go through his head, and that ended his life. I mean, in one moment he's just sitting there by a pool, and the next moment he's gone. So all that to say, it's given me a deeper appreciation for life in seeing how quickly it can be taken away. And while I definitely don't fear what comes next, I definitely see the value of the difference that can be made in sticking around.
Is any part of your work, and I'm just so curious about so many of these questions, like, does any part of your work to work with people to get them to not be afraid of death? Or is that really, it really is bringing people and messages and the canvas and everything you just described through from the other side? It's not really the opposite.
Well, I think when we have validation that there's some continuation of the bond, the relationship, I think that does kind of contextualize things. It gives us an understanding that, well, if we believe this, if I'm hearing things, there's no way this person could know through any other means, then it gives some sense of value to this idea that we do keep going, and that maybe this mortal coil is not all there is. And that can give people a sense of affirmation and kind of spiritual comfort in knowing there's more to the story. But largely, I think more than anything, we do think of it as being a topic about death, but so often these readings end up focusing on life and how to live more freely and how to not allow the restraints of fear and of shame, limit our experience while we're here. And that oftentimes is more even than themes that come through than death itself.
That makes sense. And to your point, when someone's there 1 minute and then there's an umbrella and they're not, just really appreciating that we have no problems today, people.
Yeah, it's all about, I think, perspective, and other people's suffering and them suffering more doesn't invalidate our suffering, but it can certainly contextualize it. And for me, has allowed me to have a sense of gratitude that I don't think I would otherwise have if I was just living in celebrity land in Hollywood. It's very humbling, without a doubt.
That's a good point. Are our loved ones, like, if someone doesn't come, if someone's not getting a reading, obviously when you get a reading, you said sometimes they don't come through, but most of the time somebody comes through. Like, are our loved ones like here now? I mean, does it take a reading at all times? I mean, to get a message, of course it does, but like, is there presence around us at all times?
I think people oftentimes worry about that a little bit. To answer your question, yeah, I absolutely feel that we are never truly alone. And that can kind of skeeve people out sometimes. They think, oh gosh, well, what if I'm taking the shower? What if I'm going to the bathroom? Is grandma watching? And I will say this, that, when people come through, I really believe that they've processed their humanity. Grandma took showers. Grandma had to make love in order to have you into creation. So these things that we worry about, whether they see or don't see it, I think are kind of trivial in the sense that it's all human, and they definitely tend to seem to reflect conversations we have, things we just did. All of these things often come through in readings, and that speaks to the fact that they clearly are aware of what we do and don't do, and kind of the deeper meaning behind what we do to honor them.
What about, I saw online, I don't know if this was recent or older, where you were reading, I forgot, I think it was like a celebrity where it was almost like a ghost. Like, they were saying, it was two in particular where like they were walking down a hall at night and they felt someone there, or they felt a presence. And it was like a house that and it wasn't a hostel, but it was like someone was in their house.
Yeah, you definitely have situations like that. There were a number of different ones where people would feel presences, but I think it definitely kind of speaks to the fact that when it comes to hauntings and things along those lines, I mean, people clearly, whether you believe in ghosts or not, almost everybody has a ghost story, and that's kind of telling.
You mentioned like the stuff you're doing now with like the collective membership with Fireside and at your live shows, like, I agree. Sometimes it is editing and people need to see things to be believers more so in person. Which again, by going to your live show, I mean, you're sitting there and you're saying things and they're so specific and people are like having that aha moment. But what do you say to the naysayers out there?
I think it comes with the territory. Mediumship is very controversial. It always has been. And then when you throw being well known into that category, it definitely goes into the mix. I think there's an important focus on skepticism in the sense that it is a very important value to have. Having doubt is how we answer questions. And I think it can be a beautiful way of having understanding. However, within reason, I think nowadays we've seen the emergence of kind of hyper skepticism, and you've seen people who unfortunately are skeptical around climate change or skeptical around vaccines. And so skepticism does not necessarily equate to intelligence. And I think it's important to recognize the difference between subjective experience and objective truth. And this medium world exists very much in the subjective. It's like art, it's like love. It's going to be meaning based. And so what one person sees meaning in, someone else may not, but it doesn't invalidate it for the person who does see meaning. And so I really approach it more from that angle, less of an objective angle. But I think there's something to be said about, the value of personal takeaways, even if it, doesn't necessarily fit everybody's view of what would be helpful.
Right. And it's just certain people just can't grasp it, which then that's their own. I mean, that's like anything that you can't really grasp.
There's a lot that I can't grasp and a lot of spiritualities I can't grasp, but I still can recognize that they serve a demographic of people, and there's value in it.
On Life After Death, for which you've been nominated for an Emmy, we'll just say that again, people. And by the way, where are you going to keep this Emmy if you win?
I'm not superstitious, just a little superstitious. So I don't have a spot yet, but I'll keep you posted. You'll be the first person
You'll have
nominated
to
you if it happens.
you'll have to find like, just in case you get future Emmys, you have to plan around that. You got to start planning now, Tyler.
Yes, I've got like a little statue here, but he's kind of like a little placeholder, so we'll see.
We'll start with that. Well, we did see on Life After Death, you got involved in some like PI work and like cold case solving. Like, is that like, do you do a lot of that in your day to day? I mean, I imagine with a 3,000 person wait list, you don't have time.
Well, I definitely prioritize urgent cases, cases with people who may be terminally ill or nearing the end of their life. I do a lot of readings for people in those states, as well as very often situations involving mysterious passings, not even necessarily always just missing people, but cases where there's some degree of anomaly or a missing, answer. Sometimes intuition can kind of help fill in certain blanks. What I really liked about that on the Netflix show was being able to work with a private investigator, because it allowed me to kind of apply what I do in a way that was a little bit more agnostic. It allowed me to go through a third party versus having to work with a family, which I think can be counterproductive. When someone has lost a loved one or they don't know where they are in an incredibly emotional, vulnerable state. And so for me, ethically, it was important to not do that work directly in the event that there was bad news.